Hello and a warm welcome back to the channel of Motoring Nonsense. Now, you might not have noticed this from my past YouTube videos, but I don't like to take life very seriously. I think there's too much sadness and seriousness in the world, and I think we should just all embrace our inner childishness and be quite puerile. And luckily for us, someone at Hyundai, or Hyundai as I'm probably going to say in this video, shares my worldview, because this Ioniq N is a 650 horsepower electric family hatchback thing that isn't very serious at all. In fact, it's been engineered very seriously to be very not serious. I've done donuts in car parks in it. It goes out of corners a bit sideways. It's got silly fake rev counter modes which actually make driving it, well, loads of fun. It is one of the most fun cars I've ever driven, and it's easily the most fun I've ever had in an electric car. In this video, we're going to find out if it's worth its £65,000 entry price. Let's go. Actually, saying entry price is probably a bit poor form on my part, because there aren't really any options for this car other than the sunroof and a few paint options, which are a couple of £100. 65 grand gets you, well, this, in terms of numbers, as I said, 650 horsepower, which you only get in the slightly cringily titled N-Grin Boost mode, which you press the button on the steering wheel, you get 10 seconds of 650 horsepower. Otherwise, it's actually 600 horsepower. And I think that's 226 horsepower from the front motor, 386 or 383 from the rear axle. It's very, very fast, 0 to 62 at its fastest in that boost mode, 3.4 seconds. It'll romp on to 160 something miles an hour, which is very impressive for an electric car. But yeah, it is the first all-electric N car from Hyundai. And to be honest, they've not really had many misses with their N cars. The i30N was brilliant, the i20N was brilliant, and actually I quite like the Kona N, even though that's slightly unpopular liking a fast SUV. But Hyundai has just axed all of its petrol fast N models, so this is it for the time being. And if this is an example of what an electric N car can actually do and how it can make you feel, sign me up. Yeah, we should probably talk about the looks, shouldn't we? Because we've got to talk about the looks, because it's ridiculous. Now, when the Ioniq 5 came out all the way back in 2021 now, I thought it was a great piece of design. It kind of looked retro, modern, cyberpunky. I thought it was an SUV, but really it's just a big inflated hatchback. And actually it makes more sense, I think, as this N model, which sits 20mm lower. It's 8 centimeters longer because of the chin spoilers and bits at the back. It is wider as well. It's quite a wide car, this, but it just looks amazing, I think. It's got this kind of mesh grille here, which is apparently functional for cooling stuff. Yeah, I love this performance matte blue paint. You can get it in gloss as well. There's an orange one, which looks fantastic as well. And all of this black plastic on the front. It's very slabby, but I think it does work. Now, it's on massive 21-inch wheels. It's got 275 section P0 tyres on it as well. So, as is traditional for Hyundai's N division, they've taken the engineering very seriously. But there's an elephant in the room, isn't there? The weight. Yeah, this weighs 2.2 tons. Now, that's a lot because electric cars are heavy because of batteries and motors and things like that. But I was looking back through the notes on my phone of previous cars that I filmed, because I'm a nerd, I keep notes on everything. And the Porsche Cayenne Turbo GT weighs the same as this. And that, up to this point, is the most fun I've ever had in an SUV on the road, as a V8 powered fire-breathing thing that went sideways in a straight line. But yeah, this is the same weight as that. So yeah, it's heavy, but in context it's about on par with other heavy cars. Now, the engineering that you can't see under this makes it very different from a regular Ioniq 5. It has got beefed up front and rear subframes. I think they're actually new. It's got something like 41 more weld points on the chassis. It's got bigger brakes. It's got 3-stage adaptive dampers, so you can change the ride stiffness. It's got stiffer everything. The motor mounts, the battery mounts, they're all beefed up. There's a load of work that's gone on under the skin of this to make sure it doesn't tear itself apart when you go around corners really fast, which is nice when you're spending £65,000, I guess. Now, talking of the battery on the Ioniq 5N, that is one of its weaknesses. It has got a big battery, it's 84 kilowatt hours. That's used in the new facelifted normal Ioniq 5 to give a range of 350 miles. This can't do 350 miles. They claim about 278 miles. I've been getting more like 220 miles out of this, maybe 230 if you drive it fairly gently. I've been averaging about 2.8 to 3 miles per kilowatt hour. But hey, it can fast charge at 240 kilowatts. Some bits of Hyundai's website say 350 kilowatts, but yeah, The other bits say 240. But yeah, you can also do vehicle to load stuff. I've actually been charging my remote control car off this while on video shoots because I'm a child. But I think at the back it doesn't look quite as together as the front. It's a bit slabby, it's a bit all over the place. It's got this massive diffuser on it, and it's got these kind of checkered flag reflectors here. It's okay. Now the boot is a bit smaller as well. It's 480 litres, so you lose 50 litres over a regular Ioniq 5, but there's still big enough space for loads of stuff, my umbrellas. You've got space under there for your cables and for the vehicle to load adapter. There's a little thing here that you can twist and pull off to open this charging flap if it ices up or gets stuck. There's a cable release there for it. I've got room for my child's favourite peacock feather, the things you do as a parent. But yeah, it is still a practical car, but let's look at the interior because the tech in there that makes it fun to drive is worth looking at. So you're going to look at it, unless you've clicked away already because my trousers are a bit too short. Now, one very important update at the rear of the Ioniq 5N, and this is an update that's come to other Ioniq 5 models as well over the past couple of years. It's finally got a rear windscreen wiper. You need it because in the rain, this just gets caked in shite really quickly because of the shape of the car. And they've only just thought, do you know what? We should stick a rear window wiper on it. I imagine there's a big punch up between the car designers at Hyundai and the people that actually use their cars in the wet. Inside, there's not as much N stuff as you might think. There's a few kind of bits of blue stitching, and you've got these sport seats, which are very comfortable, but aren't quite huggy enough given the G-forces you can generate in this car. But otherwise, it looks like an Ioniq 5. You've got wireless charger down there, you've got a couple of USB-Cs, you've got lots of climate control stuff in the middle there, you've got wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, you've got two big screens, digital driver's display, and a steering wheel with a billion-T buttons on it, which I'm going to go into in a second because there's lots of interesting stuff in there. Otherwise, loads of storage down there, lots of napkins from this being used by a film crew yesterday, and a little cubby hole there. But yeah, on the steering wheel, let's talk about the steering wheel. So, see those buttons at the top? You've got your driving mode one there, so you've got Eco, Normal and Sport, but I only just really use Normal because these buttons down here, these N buttons, are customizable, and they're the ones you really use when you're doing sporty driving. I'll get onto that again in a second. That's your N grin boost button there. Is it going to focus? That's your N grin boost button there, that red one. You can customize that star button to do things like turn the speed limit warning off. The gear knob's lurking behind there, can almost talk. And that is your steering wheel. But the modes are important, so I'm going to jump in the front and show you them now. Yeah, the really important stuff is this N menu, which takes a second to load with this little animation, and then you've got access to a load of different settings on the Ioniq 5N. So for lots of these, you've got to have the stability control switch to sport or off, and it says only use on the racetrack. I would heed that advice, to be honest. But N torque distribution, is it going to let me do it? Yes, hang on. Let me switch to stability controlled sport. There we go, right. So N torque distribution, okay, lets you make this fully rear wheel drive or fully front wheel drive or somewhere in the middle. You can't do that with a petrol car. Some petrol cars will let you go fully rear wheel drive in a four wheel drive car, but in this you can do that. N pedal basically is a really high level of brake regen. So when you lift off, you get loads of weight over the nose for faster turning, and lift off oversteer and then oversteer when you plant it. Again, only do that on a racetrack. N race, it basically cools the motor and battery more extremely for when you're on track, but presumably knackers your range a bit. N drift optimizer, that sets the car up for drifting, and I might have used that in a car park at Thruxton. I'll put a little bit of me laughing and smoking the tyres in here. This is quite easy. And then really it's just about setting up your mode. So you can customize the motor response, the steering response, suspension between those three settings, as I said. The electronic limited slip diff, you can choose how that feels. The ESC, you've got sport, off and normal. There we go. And the head-up display. And then your exhaust sound. So this comes into play when you're driving normally or when you're using the NE shift mode, which we'll talk about in a second. So you can have a simulation of basically an i30N's engine, an Evolution thing, which just sounds futuristic, and supersonic, which makes it sound like a jet fighter. And apparently they put that in because when they were designing this car, Top Gun Maverick came out, and they thought, that's quite cool, let's make a version that sounds like a jet fighter. And then, oh God, there's so many options. You can choose how grippy the road is when you're doing launch control. N E-shift, there we go, it recreates the feeling of driving a vehicle equipped with a combustion engine. How quaint. But yeah, when you activate that, it won't let me do it at the moment. Basically, it gives you a rev counter up here, and then you can rev it and change gears using the paddles, and it thumps in gear shifts like you're in a hurricane or something. It sounds crap. It's so much fun, and it's really engaging. And when you lift off the accelerator, you've got pops and burbles through the speakers. And yeah, there you go. You can choose your sound. N road sense, when it sees a twisty road sign, it will ask if you want to go into sport mode. I love that. And oh God, there's so many settings. It does tell you though what they all do. So it is actually easier to use than I've probably made it sound, but there's a lot of stuff in there to make this fun to drive. Now I'm just going to very quickly touch on rear passenger space in the Ioniq 5N. It's very good. I've got loads of knee room, loads of headroom. Foot room is a bit cramped. I've got my small Converse on, but my big boots wouldn't fit under there. I've got an N badge on the back of the sports seats in front. I've got door bins that are big enough. It's got a very flat floor, and the middle seat's a decent width, and I've got 2 USB-Cs. It's fine. My kids have loved it back here, being accelerated very firmly into their child seats. I've got window blinds as well, and a heated rear seat, and they still slide and recline, so you can go along like this in a really natural position. Right, that's enough about the inside of the Ioniq 5N. I'm getting a little bit shiny for some reason, so let's go and do what the Pope said to the German government of 1933 onwards. Let's go and do something a bit naughty. Yeah, probably didn't say that, but let's go and drive the Ioniq 5N anyway. Right, going for a drive in a Hyundai Ioniq 5N is much the same as going for a drive in a normal one. You put your foot on the brake, turn it into D, well, turn things into D, you're just born with one, aren't you? Or not. And then you just pull away, and it just feels very normal. When you're in normal mode, it rides sort of okay. You can feel a slightly firm edge from those 21-inch wheels, but you think, oh yeah, I've got a good view out. I can see out, apart from the back corners as always. It's just a normal car. And then, even in normal mode, if you think, oh, I'm at 20 miles an hour, I want to get to 40. There we go, that's 40 miles an hour, and all my insides have moved. It is ludicrously fast. Yes, if you put it in normal or eco modes, things do soften up in terms of the response, but it's just a fast EV. It doesn't feel too dissimilar to the Kia EV6 GT that I tested last year, and that was basically just a fast cruiser that didn't want to be driven hard in corners. However, if you put it in sport mode, it sharpens things up. But if you put it in one of the N modes, this one has got traction and stability control in sport and everything set as extreme as they get, then yeah, you put your foot down and bloody shifts. But also, you can feel it sending most of its power to the back wheels. Yes, it's still four-wheel drive, so you're not going to put it in a ditch immediately. But if you come out of the corner and boot it, the back axle moves out. It doesn't skid necessarily, but it's moving further out in the corner than the front. So, Jesus, it's fast. And you feel like you have to be on top of it, on top of your game and paying attention. But it's very reassuring to drive fast. But I've not driven an EV that feels as rear biased as this does. And then you have to press the star button to turn the speed limit warning off, which is massively distracting and takes your eyes off the road for a while. Interestingly, I have just filmed a video with Motorpoint that's coming out in the next couple of weeks where we put eye tracking glasses on people and made them do stuff like this in the car. So subscribe to the Motorpoint YouTube channel. But anyway, that's by the by. I'm going to get some twisty country roads so we can actually drive this a little bit faster and talk about whether you can feel the weight, whether it's fun, and whether it puts a big smile on my face. Let's go. Right, I'm now in N E-shift mode. So I can shift gears. It only plays the sound inside the car, so you're not going to embarrass yourself like in a Kodiaq VRS, but I love the way it thumps you through the drivetrain when you change gears. And when you lift off and when you downshift, you get the occasional burble through the speakers like that. It is very silly, it is very childish. But again, when you're actually on a country road, it just works really well. But you do have to stop and remind yourself, it's real life, it's not a computer game, and there are still speed limits, because it does egg you into going faster than you think. And the noises are a bit like, I'm playing Gran Turismo, but actually in reality, you're doing 60 mile an hour through Aunt Madge's hedge. I like how it cuts the sound as well when the traction control kicked in out of that junction. That's really cool. Now, while I'm actually driving to the country road, years ago I had this thought that if I was a car company, I would build an EV platform with powerful front and rear motors, which were completely tunable to recreate the torque curves of petrol cars. So you could pay like 50 quid to have a 997 turbo or something like that, or you could have a naturally aspirated feeling, and you got the fake sound to match. Now, this is the closest thing that anyone's ever done to that stupid idea that I had, where you could download different cars and have your car feel like, you know, a Ferrari F430 or something like that. This is cool because when you're in 8th gear, it's telling me on the windscreen, I've got a rev counter as well. I put my foot down, it accelerates a bit, but not very much. I need to shift down, and now it accelerates. And you forget, after a while, you're in an electric car where you should be able to accelerate endlessly no matter what revs you're at, because there are no revs, really. It is fun. It is just fun, and it all sounds really cheesy, and yes, the engine noise sounds synthesized, but when you're hooning it, you don't really care. You're just enjoying the acceleration, the thrust, and the fake gear shifts, which make you go like this. It is cool, though I think it is actually slower in this mode because it's doing all the fake torque limiting. If you want it to be fast, don't drive it in any shift mode, just stick it in sport or one of the N modes, but here we go. Anyway, let's talk about motorway refinement, seeing as I'm nearly at a 70 limit road. Let's hoof it up here, let's get up to 70. I'm sorry, that is so silly, but it's so addictive. But anyway, let's turn that sound off for a second. It's just gone. And just put it back into normal mode. There we go. It's not the most refined version of the Ioniq 5 at motorway speeds. I'm getting quite a lot of thumping through the suspension from those big wheels. It did annoy me a bit to start with, to be honest, but I've got used to it, and I think the performance is a decent way to offset the kind of the jiggly, so it's all right, you accept it. But anyway, let's get to a country road. Wind noise is okay as well, and we'll talk about the more fun stuff. Right, we're getting towards my country road now, and I'm going to start with one of the Ioniq 5N's weaker areas, as you might expect, and it's the steering. Even in Sport Plus mode, it doesn't suddenly give you loads of feel or confidence, it just weights up a bit, and you have to learn to trust the front end of this car a bit when you're chucking into corners. And you do want to trust it because you can end up at corners very, very quickly. Like, yeah, you can just accelerate through corners because this car has loads and loads of mechanical grip. Oh, jeez, it's just so fast, but it isn't a one-trick pony. What's amazed me most about this, really, is the chassis and how well it just feels all as one piece, like all the very best Porsches. So the brakes are good, but you do end up feeling the weight. But yeah, just out of there, you can feel it moving around. You can feel what the chassis is doing. It is very entertaining to drive quickly. Jesus, you end up firing out of corners so fast. But you can feel it moving around. You can feel it moving the torque around when you plant your foot. It feels alive, like some of the best drivers' cars in the world. It's not giving you the tactility that you get in a Cayman GT4 RS, but for a 2.2 ton EV, it is bloody impressive, and you can adjust the brakes to be sharp if you want. Right? I normally go up there, but I'm actually going to go and do that again because that is too much fun. Right, I'm going to go to my performance options and just check that I've got everything set the way I want it. Yes, that's fine. It reckons this road has a high grip level. I'm not sure if I chose that, but yeah, N grid boost, and just it is silly. It is silly, and then you can just stick the kind of fake revy kind of mode on, and I think I've got the Top Gun one at the moment, but it doesn't really matter what mode you're in. It's just putting a smile on your face, and you think, I shouldn't be driving an EV this hard and feeling it sway like that on the exit of a corner. Now, if I'm being super nerdy, I would say that when the back steps wide, which it does occasionally, it then kind of, you sense the mass as it kind of settles on its springs once the back's kicked out. And that can feel a little bit unnerving, because it's like, oh God, yeah, it is quite heavy and has just gone a bit sideways. But other than that, when you drive up to that point, it's just loads of fun. And this is a massive old Evo magazine cliche, but I really don't think there's a faster car than this across a crappy British B road that you don't know, in whatever the weather. It's like the old Evos and Imprezas and things like that. It grips, it goes, it gives you enough confidence to chuck it about, and it's fun. It is honestly, I can't even talk, it's blowing my mind at how good this is as a driver's car. You forget that, you know, it's got all these electronic gimmicks. They do all just come together and work together to give you a car that's moving about, telling you what it's doing, is very fast, not very efficient, quite fun. And actually, just before we go back to me for a conclusion, a word on efficiency. I have now done, since I got this car last week, 362 miles in this car, and I've averaged 2.7 miles per kilowatt hour. Quite a bit of that was chilling on the motorway. Probably an equal amount was being an absolute penis on country roads. Well done, Hyundai engineers. Now, just before we go back to me for a conclusion, there are two things about the Ioniq 5N that I don't really like. Firstly, the turning circle is pretty crap, to be honest. I don't know what it is, but it's not very good. And secondly, there's no like physical shortcut button for the most useful menu, which is the N menu. So yeah, when you're in CarPlay and when you're in other menus, you've got to kind of, I want to go back here to change all of my settings. There just isn't one. But anyway, two minor quibbles, otherwise a good car. Let's go back for a conclusion. Right, time to sum up my thoughts on the Hyundai Ioniq 5N. Well, the flies certainly bloomin' like it, and so do I. It is blown my mind, to be honest. It is really shown me how fun an EV can be. When the right engineers get their hands on a car which already had good potential and just get set free to do what they want. So all the electronic modes and things, they really give you a car that can cruise reasonably comfortably, or do skids in a car park, do donuts, or just be driven like a petrol car in a weird simulation that just feels so, not convincing, but just so engaging that you actually end up using it. So you end up blatting through the gears, lifting off, pitching it into corners on the nose and driving it like you would some of the very best hot hatches. And it reminds me most strongly, weirdly, of the Mercedes-AMG A45S, which is still basically my favorite hot hatch out there. It's got 400 horsepower, it's four-wheel drive, and it's very agile and mobile. This feels like a 2.2 ton version of that, but faster, and dare I say it, more fun. And you might think, yes, it's all gimmicky and gadgety, and I guess you could think that, but I'm of an age now where I think EVs are starting to feel quite sterile and quite samey to drive. This blows all of those preconceptions into the ditch and does a big skid on top of them. It is very, very good. Whether it's worth 65 grand is up to you, really. As I always say, everything's got more expensive, but this is a phenomenal piece of kit and you don't need to stick any options on it. Now, the big downside for me is the range. Only getting 220 miles out of this isn't great if you're going to use it. I guess the analogy is you've bought an E90 M3 with that high revving 4-litre V8. It's very fun, it's very fast, sounds great, but it can't go very far in a tank of fuel if you use the performance. It's exactly the same here. You can't go very far in it if you're having all of the fun. But otherwise, best EV on sale today if you like driving. And you can ignore the fact it's 2.2 tons. But whatever, don't really feel it most of the time. I've been Tim. Like this video if you've liked it. Subscribe to the channel because I want to get to 30,000 fairly soon before I lose all my hair. Oh no, wait. And I'll see you next time. Go down to the comments and leave me the Korean word for, oh my God, it's really good fun. And my testicles have fallen off. Goodbye. Right, I'm now in NE shift mode. So I can shift gears. It only plays the sound inside the car, so you're not going to embarrass yourself like in a Kodiaq VRS, but I love the way it thumps you through the drivetrain when you change gears. And when you lift off and when you downshift, you get the occasional burble through the speakers like that. It is very silly, it is very childish. But again, when you're actually on a country road, it just works really well. But you do have to stop and remind yourself, it's real life, it's not a computer game, and there are still speed limits, because it does egg you into going faster than you think. And the noises are a bit like, I'm playing Gran Turismo, but actually in reality, you're doing 60 mile an hour through Aunt Madge's hedge. Probably not a good idea, but anyway, twisty roads, it's going to do something. I like how it cuts the sound as well when the traction control kicked in out of that junction. That's really cool. Now, while I'm actually driving to the country road, years ago I had this thought that if I was a car company, I would build an EV platform with powerful front and rear motors, which were completely tunable to recreate the torque curves of petrol cars. So you could pay like 50 quid to have a 997 turbo or something like that, or you could have a naturally aspirated feeling, and you got the fake sound to match. Now, this is the closest thing that anyone's ever done to that stupid idea that I had, where you could download different cars and have your car feel like, you know, a Ferrari F430 or something like that. This is cool because when you're in 8th gear, it's telling me on the windscreen, I've got a rev counter as well. I put my foot down, it accelerates a bit, but not very much. I need to shift down, and now it accelerates. And you forget, after a while, you're in an electric car where you should be able to accelerate endlessly no matter what revs you're at, because there are no revs, really. It is fun. It is just fun, and it all sounds really cheesy. And yes, the engine noise sounds synthesized, but when you're hooning it, you don't really care. You're just enjoying the acceleration, the thrust, and the fake gear shifts, which make you go like this. It is cool, though I think it is actually slower in this mode because it's doing all the fake torque limiting. If you want it to be fast, don't drive it in any shift mode, just stick it in sport or one of the N modes, but here we go. Anyway, let's talk about motorway refinement, seeing as I'm nearly at a 70 limit road. Let's hoof it up here, let's get up to 70. I'm sorry, that is so silly, but it's so addictive. But anyway, let's turn that sound off for a second. It's just gone. And just put it back into normal mode. There we go. It's not the most refined version of the Ioniq 5 at motorway speeds. I'm getting quite a lot of thumping through the suspension from those big wheels. It did annoy me a bit to start with, to be honest, but I've got used to it, and I think the performance is a decent way to offset the kind of the jiggly, so it's all right. You accept it. But anyway, let's get to a country road. Wind noise is okay as well, and we'll talk about the more fun stuff.